All right, welcome Laurier Tri Club. Thanks for tuning in here. Talking with Griffin. Sounds like a lot of you got some awesome races coming up in the coming months here. Maybe you're just considering doing a triathlon over the next number of months. So wanted to go through some of my top tips here to kind of executing your best triathlon. So a little intro of myself. My name's Mark Cullen. I'm the founder and head coach at LP Endurance. So I started the club up about 5 years ago now. I'm coaching full time. It's a full-time business for me, which is amazing to be able to get to help a number of different individuals. I think I was doing the math the other day that I've helped over like 300 plus people with their endurance journey across everything from running, triathlon, and then in the last few years been working with a number of elite CrossFitters and high rocks athletes as well. So working mostly, I specialize within the club now of working with a number of professional triathletes, CrossFitters who are going to the CrossFit games, and then a lot of more the upper end or mid pack sort of age groupers who are making a looking to make that next step to either like landing on podiums or either local or more competitive, maybe Ironman or national races, or kind of looking to win races. So I've had my wife is the one in the middle there, but I think I've had five Ironman champions now across the like age group overall who have been able to break the tape over the last couple of years. So that's been definitely satisfying as a coach, but also through the club, we have six other coaches who help out athletes of all different ability levels from people who are just considering getting into the sport, beginners, all the way up to elites. So myself still competing. I still am doing triathlon these days, mostly kind of the 70.3 and Ironman distance, more friendly for an old dog like myself. But I still like to jump into the sprint and Olympic distances as well. Mostly I'm coaching remotely these days. I actually just moved from Waterloo out to Vancouver area. So working with kind of athletes remotely across Canada and the US. But we do have a big contingent in Waterloo. Probably about 40% of the club is local there who do a bunch of in-person group workouts. But lots of people in kind of Southern Ontario as well who come out for our group workouts and clinics that we have. Just wanted to do a quick refresher of sort of some of the distances in triathlon so we're kind of familiar with the terminology as I go through. So I didn't include the try in here, but that's typically like kind of half of that sprint distance. But just so we're all kind of talking the same terms here when I'm talking sprint Olympics 70.3, also known as half Ironman and Ironman, kind of how long a lot of those durations are in terms of the distances and times it takes most people, usually kind of our recommended hourly training for people in that. What are some of the key training focuses when you need to start to think about those races so you can see sort of the shorter the race, the shorter you can sometimes think about it. It's also going to depend on the athlete and their sort of sporting past and how much time they've spent in triathlon or across certain disciplines in there as well. And then nutrition becomes more and more important the longer the race is. So I'll talk a little bit about that in the upcoming slides. And then sort of how hard are these races going to feel. So I really think like sprint, you're like thrown right in the fire right away, where if you go up to something like an Ironman, you're sort of just like holding yourself lightly on the fire all day. And it just keeps getting harder and harder as the day goes along. And then some of the mantras there of like being patient the longer it is. We know if we go out at a sprint effort in an Ironman, then we're going to be dying for the rest of the day versus if we go too easy in a sprint, then we leave a lot on the table there. And then something in between for the Olympic and 70.3. So just wanted to put that chart in there. It's a good kind of reminder of some of the high level pieces of each of the distances there. But I'm going to talk about a bunch of these facets as we go through here. So I kind of pulled this next slide together of some of the most common mistakes I see in triathlon. So there's triathlon we know is a very complex sport and there's a whole lot of mistakes you can make along the way. But the beauty of it is once you do your first triathlon, I'm still like 10 plus years into my triathlon journey, and there's always something I'm improving on or tweaking to make myself get to that finish line a little bit faster or have a better experience. So cool part about this sport is you can improve and learn for years and years. If you've ever been to an Ironman or a local event, you see people on the podium at 60, 70 years old. So this is like a sport you can do for life, which is really cool that everybody can share the same course, no matter what your age or even get to share the course with professionals and stuff like that. There will be time at the end for questions, by the way, so don't feel like you need to jump in here. We'll save those until the end. So a couple of the non-bolded ones here, I'm going to talk a bunch more in the upcoming slides, but some of the most common mistakes I hear, like I had in the slide before, is not leaving enough time to prepare for the event. So the amount of people I've seen come to me and be like, "Hey, I want to do this Ironman in 4 weeks down the road. What should I do?" It's like, well, you're gonna probably have a tough day out there. So the more time you can put on your side for any of this stuff, the more you can play in for things like injuries that come in, or like you guys school things that come in that not derail your, maybe you want to go travel or work or things like that. The more time you have on your side, the less stress you put on yourself along the way. One of the biggest things we see, especially newer athletes coming into the sport from a bunch of different sort of sporting backgrounds, is trying to crush every single workout every day. Triathlon is very much a patience sport. And if you crush yourself every day across all three, you're just going to end up injured or super tired and just not improve. So triathlons play the long game, just stack those kind of steady bricks every day. And the mantra is always kind of having be solid every day versus occasionally great in training, especially a sport like running. In this, we know how easy it is to get injured, so you got to be smart on that side. Another key thing to remember is like sleep stress management is a massive piece. It's all this same stress bucket that includes our work, family, school, and the training is in there too. So something's got to give or take. And if your stress bucket is full with other pieces, that's going to affect your training. So just remember the best training is what fits into your life comfortably. So while you may think you have 12 hours to train in a week, you're probably safer to do something like 9 in a week and have those other hours where you can get that extra hour of sleep, or be able to unwind after your workout before you launch into a busy day, or have time to eat a good meal after that hard workout. So just remember, something that is sustainable and you can be consistent is always going to be better than trying to just force it in there and do the maximum right away. I'm going to talk about a bunch of these coming up, but a lot of pieces around race fueling, transitions, tapering, not knowing the course, not checking out your gear ahead of time. So we know there's a lot of gear in triathlon when you have to load up that car with wetsuits and bikes and all your run gear and helmet and stuff like that. It's a complex sport, and a lot of things can go wrong if your gear isn't up to date and you haven't tested it ahead of time. The nice thing is, if you do this stuff ahead of time, you just mitigate the risk of bad things happening exponentially. And then last minute changes. People love to do all these last minute changes to their bike or their race plan and things like that the day before. It's a common coping strategy for people as they're stressed on a race week. But the rule is always nothing new on race day, only stuff that you trained with. And then over focusing on outcome, triathlon is a wild one in that, like, you can pick all the predictor times you want going into a race, but depending on what the water conditions are like that day, it might be crazy wavy, or the swim gets canceled, or it's crazy windy on the bike or hot. So the heat, the weather is all going to play a massive factor in what actually happens on the day. Same with outcomes in a race. You never know who's going to show up that day. So really some of the tips I'm going to give you is just focusing on what you can do to get the most out of yourself that day, is going to always be the best strategy to have a good experience and enjoy doing this sport for the long term, because it's like it's such a massive part of my life now in such a great way that I've been able to meet friends into my mid 30s now still. It's just such an awesome sport. And like, I played hockey and soccer competitively growing up. This is like a new lease on athletic life, a sport that I could suck at, be a beginner at, and improve every single year as I go along. So play the long game, and this can be a pretty magical sport for many years. And then comparing to others, we know that's the wild age of Instagram and Strava. It's easy to see what everyone's doing and everyone puffing their chest out on Instagram and Strava, but that's not telling the full story of maybe the struggles they're actually going through and stuff. So just remember, don't get too worked up with what you see there, and pick a community of people that are actually out there to support you, and you'll go a long way in this. All right, so I'm going to kind of go chronologically through how we can think about a race. So when we think about kind of those final weeks, like here in Ontario, we're going to be coming up on race season pretty much start of June. Milton's usually the kickoff to that season with Milton Sprint. So a lot of people are going to be maybe 4 weeks out if they're getting to there. So what are some things we can be doing over the next 4 weeks or longer term if your race is maybe in July, August, September? All of these are great things to start to be thinking of so you can be proactive in your approach and get yourself to that start line to have a great experience. So, one of the biggest things you can do ahead of time is go on the website, look at the course maps so you know what nutrition's on course, how hilly is this course, where the hill's going to be, what time of year is it going to be, so what kind of weather are we going to be dealing with? Is it going to be freezing cold in the water, or is it going to be warm where I might not be having a wetsuit for it? So the more you can start to simulate these race conditions from the weather to the winds to the heat, the more you're going to be prepared mentally and physically when you get to the race. And then in terms of like pacing, fueling, and transitions, the more you can practice sort of these things in your training is going to go a long way too. So one of the best ways we can do a bunch of this stuff is through either race sims or tune-up races. So beautiful things, something like if you are signed up for an Olympic distance, something like doing a tune-up sprint triathlon or even a try, or in your training doing something like the sprint distance or 60% of the distance of, say, the Olympic distance within your training could be a great day to sort of work out those kinks where you could try out what am I going to use race nutrition wise, and I'll give you some guidelines coming up there. But also like your race gear, if you have like different wheels that you put on your bike, or you just got aero bars, or you have a different helmet, all of this stuff is great to test out in tune-up races or in race sims where you can do it in training in a low stakes environment where you have less on the line and then you just work all of those kinks out. But transitions are a super easy one. I'll talk about that coming up, where you can shave off lots of free time for no extra fitness, but just a little bit of practice. One of the biggest things in triathlon is brick workouts. So this could be anything from going right from swim to bike or right from bike to run. So that's where tune-up races or these race sims are great for that. We can all do a hard run without having to do a swim or bike before it, but it's a very different story when you hammered the swim and then you had to hammer it on the bike on a hilly course that was windy. And if you didn't nail your nutrition, it's pretty amazing when you get off the bike and you suddenly have no legs. So your body can adapt pretty quickly if you do some of these brick workouts. So one of the shocking ones that I didn't do often in the early part of my career is swim to bike bricks. So it doesn't need to be where you're like right out of the water and on your bike, but you could do something like a soft brick where you go to your local pool, say you go to Laurier and you do like a 750-meter sort of swim there, and you have 5 or 10 minutes where you change, go out to your car, and then hop on the bike. You'll notice it's a very different feeling than if you just hopped on the bike. And then same to bike to run. What happens is we call them brick workouts because your first couple times you do a run right after the bike is you have this like brick feeling in your legs where it feels like your legs are 300 pounds and it just feels absolutely horrible. But you do this over 3, 4 weeks, a couple times a week in the final 4 to 6 weeks. And there's actually this crazy shift that people notice where eventually they almost feel better running off the bike than if they just like walked out the door without doing a bike to do a run. So it's pretty cool how you can really shift that like mental and physical sort of cue to almost start to enjoy brick workouts after that. And then when we talk about periodization, so this is how you're sort of setting up the volume, so how many hours you're doing of each of the disciplines, as well as the intensity of these. So we have a bunch of, I should have included that in here, but these different energy systems. So VO2 max being those short, hard efforts, threshold sort of tempo being a lot more of this race pace stuff, and then commonly our aerobic stuff. So you might be familiar with zone 1 and 2, that like kind of go all day pace. So when we talk about a lot of that is kind of those final 4 to 6 weeks is where we're doing a lot of that specific work. So you'll see a lot more like race pace intensity stuff. So if we're doing an Olympic distance, you might have sort of some intervals in your bike workout that's like 4 by 8 minutes at an Olympic distance, where if you were 12 weeks before that, you might be doing some more of this VO2 max sort of workouts and maybe a little bit more aerobic based stuff. And then we get more specific in the final weeks. So periodization is super important because you don't want to just try and do race specific all the way through. You just eventually tire yourself out and you don't really get any better. So there's lots of great articles online. We're in the age of chat GPT that can come up with like great ways to help you with periodization, plug in what your race is, how much time you have, and they can come up with an awesome like weekly schedule for you, and then join a community of people that like have done the thing that you want to do. Like a tri club like this is perfect. And then that's a quick way to be able to kind of get a periodized plan that allows you to build enough volume to be ready for your race. So that's what I had in that one part of kind of weekly commitment, depending on the race distance, and then also kind of the key intervals that are going to get you ready for the race as well. So lots of online plans you can follow. We have some basic ones through LP Endurance, as well as that we had posted up weekly within your community. And then also there's like more immersive one-on-one for people who are looking for that really kind of catered approach where you have a coach that's looking at your training every single day and giving you feedback and analysis. So let's talk a little bit about race week logistics. So first of all, kind of could be blended into that slide before, but our taper. So that our taper is commonly where we're going to cut down on some of that volume and intensity to allow us to absorb all the work we did in those final weeks and freshen up so that we can have our best performance on race day. So taper basics. Two places people commonly go wrong is there is definitely a sweet spot where you'll lower a fair amount of the volume, but you don't want to make yourself that you're flat on race day and you just like are feeling super lethargic or sluggish out there. So there's a sweet spot where you lower a bunch of the intensity, the volume, but keep a lot of the intensity in there. So it might be just shorter intervals that are a shorter version of what you were doing in some of those workouts in the final 4 to 6 weeks. But where people commonly go wrong is they either rest and they'll take like the entire week off leading into a race and they wonder why they don't warm up until halfway through the race because their body's just like gone to sleep over that week. And then there's the opposite side of that coin where there's people who are trying to cram training into the final week because they're like, oh my goodness, I didn't spend enough time training for this. So I'm going to like go do a sprint triathlon 2 or 3 days before my race to make sure I can do it. And now maybe they had a decent one there, but they're not going to have enough time to recover before the race. So one of the rules of thumb is like 1 to 2 weeks out from the race, the fitness you have then is pretty much the fitness you're going to have for race day. So you just do everything in your power to come to that race nice and fresh, mentally and physically ready to go. So that's keeping a nice, still consistent training schedule, less volume, a little bit more intensity in there. Race week, there's lots of awesome gear checklists you can go through online. So if you search up like triathlon checklist, training peaks, there's really good ones there to just tick off that you have everything you need for race week. Like if you traveled for a race, you might not have been able to travel with those little like CO2 canisters that allow you to change a flat. Or maybe you forgot a race belt that holds your like race number on there. So these are all great things to check like early race week or weeks out to make sure that you've ticked all the boxes on what you need to make sure that you can keep those stress levels low in the 1 or 2 days out so that you're not scrambling for gear at the last minute. A lot of these, the beautiful thing about this sport is we can travel for a lot of the races, but that can definitely, a couple days out from our race, whether we're local or traveling for a race, mess around with our sleep and our stress. The race can be a stressful environment, but getting that good sleep, call it the 2 to 4 days out from the race and realizing the night before the race when you're a little bit amped up and just did a big carb load the day before, which I'll talk about a little bit coming up is you might not get the best sleep the night before. That is totally fine as long as you got those ones the couple days before. But if you are traveling for a race, the quicker you can get or the earlier you can get to a race to adjust to that time zone and the conditions and have time to troubleshoot any gear issues you have or travel issues that you have if a flight gets canceled. It all is super helpful and allow you to have a good race experience and troubleshoot any problems along the way. And then when we talk about nutrition, let me go back one. So nutrition in the final 2 to 3 days. For events that are 2+ hours, so maybe if you're a little bit on the slower end of things for a sprint, but anything Olympic distance or longer, and even more important as we get into things like 70.3 and Ironman, is that you're going to want to start to carb load for these events. So usually it's just 1 to 2 days before where you're going to start to shift away from a lot of that fat and fibrous foods, and you're really going to focus on sort of three things. So it's going to be hydration, but you don't want to just be chugging water all the time. One of the keys is to just add like a little pinch of salt or like electrolytes to your water during those few days. What happens is if you just drink pure water, you're just going to flush your system of all those electrolytes, which are really important for race day to like keep us mentally and physically firing from the sodium side of things. So always make sure in those days, just you're adding like a couple 100 milligrams of sodium to your water in those couple ones, like 1 or 200 milligrams just throughout the day goes a long way. And then from the carb load side of things, this usually our targets are something in the 8 to 12 grams per kilogram of body weight. It's going to be more important the longer the race is. So if I'm doing something like an Olympic distance race myself, I might be aiming for the low 2 hours, and that I'm probably just going to target the lower end of this. So if I'm a 70 kilogram athlete, then I'm aiming for maybe 8 to 10 grams. So that's going to be close to like 600-700 grams of carbs in the 1 to 2 days leading in there. And that's going to go a long way because when we get in these 2 hour events, what happens is where our body starts to run out of kind of our readily available glycogen that we store in our body. And that's where we're going to need to be carb loaded and start fueling in races and workouts that are 90+ minutes. And I'll put some parameters around fueling some of those workouts coming up too. But I can't tell you what a massive difference it makes if you nail this carb load and fuel during these races. You're strong till the end. You recover way quicker from the races. You're mentally with it the whole way, and it just becomes such a better experience. But one of the biggest spots that people go wrong in their early part of their career, when they figure it out, it's just like this aha moment. So can't recommend it enough to get some good knowledge around this stuff. There's some really good info online, but more and more there's lots of debunking of the fasted training. Try and stay away from that. So just eating before all of your training, eating after your training will go such a long way in being sustainable, having good energy and lowering your injury risk as well. There's just, if you look at any of the studies, people that underfuel their training are just exponentially in a higher risk of getting bone stress injuries or a bunch of those tendon and ligament injuries. And then once you start those, some of those injuries, it's a tough cycle to get out of. So build good habits early, and you will be doing this for many years and improving for many, many years. Let's talk about race morning. So we talked about practicing a bunch of this stuff in training. So when we get to the race, we should have tested a bunch of these nutrition strategies before. So trying out these for some of those, for example, tune-up races or race sim days, if you're doing those, like call it 3 to 8 weeks out from your races, you can be practicing some of these race morning breakfasts. So I put a picture on there. That's one of my favorites before workouts and races, is just like a white bagel with peanut butter, banana, and honey. Like it's just good complex carbs in there. And then I sip on maybe some electrolyte or sport drink, and you pretty much have what you would need for something like an Olympic distance or a 70.3. You'd be ready to go for Ironman. I might do it a little bit longer, but the intensity's low and it's less risk of digestion issues. But one of the biggest things I gotta say for races is be up early. So usually the rule of thumb is like try and be up 3 hours before your race. Yeah, it's early, especially a lot of these races start at 7 in the morning. You might need to be up early, but you probably weren't sleeping very well the night before anyway. So get up, get some caffeine in you. It's the best legal performance enhancing drug out there. So 1 to 200 milligrams of caffeine, again, practice it in your training. Can be, you don't need to do it for every workout, but use it for some key workouts and learn sort of your limits. If you're somebody that's maybe not used to having much caffeine or drinking much coffee, you just go on the lower end of 50 to 100 milligrams. But if you're somebody who's maybe a regular caffeine drinker, you could do 1 to 200 milligrams, and it's like massive performance enhancing benefits of just like making the race effort feel easier. And then you can also trickle it in during longer events, some of that caffeine. But waking up nice and early, 3 hours before, usually getting that bigger breakfast in that 2 to 3 hours before window, and then just sipping on sort of sports drink and electrolytes leading up to the race because you want to give yourself the time to have those couple good washroom breaks before so that you don't have to deal with those on course. So by doing this 2 to 3 hours before, you can have 2 or 3 washroom breaks before, and then your system's ready to go for when you get there. Nothing worse than getting in your wetsuit and then having to charge the porta potty after that. So if you can get that out of the way, you will be very happy with that. Also, just a lot of these races get super busy when you're going to the race site, so I can't recommend getting there like as early as you can, like almost when transition opens or in the first half an hour of when transition opens. There's nothing worse than getting stuck in a traffic jam and then having no time before the gun goes off to calm those nerves or get your transition set up or get those final washroom breaks in. So get there early for a local race that might be like an hour before. For a bigger race like an Ironman or something, it might be more like an hour and a half before. But be there early, go set up your transition area. So I'll talk about transitions coming up, but you'll need to go set up your transition area with all of your gear and nutrition that you bring on race morning. Some of these Ironman events, you might need to bring some of your gear the day before. So make sure that, again, we're rereading the athlete guides for these races to know what you need to bring before, what the time of the race and everything is like in there. In terms of warm up, like longer races, we have time to sort of ease into it, like a 70.3 or an Ironman, where you might not need much warm up. Maybe that's just quickly jumping in the water for a few strokes, couple arm circles, and you're good to go. Where something like a sprint triathlon, where you're kind of getting right in the mix and getting to it, you might do a short 5 or 10 minute jog and then a very short 5 or 10 minute easy swim, and then your body is ready to go and primed to get in there. So rule of thumb, usually a little bit longer warm up for shorter races, shorter warm up for longer races, because we don't want to give away energy that we're going to need to get us to the finish line of those longer races. For some of those longer rate, actually pretty much Olympic distance onwards, most of my athletes will have like a final like kind of 25-gram gel about 15 minutes before the race, just to make sure that they're topped up on that final glycogen. And because in the swim you can't really fuel during that, so especially if it's a longer race like an Olympic distance, or you might be in the water for 30 minutes and starting to work harder, then you're at least getting some fuel that's going to cover you off for that time. And then you can get to fueling on the bike and run. So that's kind of our race morning routine. So again, rule of thumb, be there early, give yourself lots of time to problem solve in case you forgot something or anything like that. Let's talk about transitions. So something a lot of people neglect, but this is like such an easy area to trim so much free speed off for just a little bit of practice and not even having to have any extra fitness, which is a cool one. So one of the rules of thumb, I say, it's at the bottom of this slide, but anything you can be doing while moving forward in the race is always a good thing. So a common mistake I see from people is they'll sit in transition one and they'll like sit there with a gel and hang out for 2 minutes and have a gel. It's like you could be 2 minutes further down the road on your bike having that gel while you're moving. So just anything you can be doing while moving forward, make sure that you're doing that, and just transitions just for the essential things to be able to change between the disciplines and get on the road. So first, when we think about setting up our transition area, usually you want to bring kind of a colorful towel, set that up kind of right beside where your bike is racked. It's going to be a little bit different depending on the race. A local race might just have a full racking area by an age group, where a bigger race like an Ironman might have specific numbers right on the rack where you'll rack at that exact number position. So again, that's why it's great to walk through the transition area the day before or race morning if you get a chance, just to be able to walk the route from where you're going to come in from the swim, how to get to your bike. Is there any like key things that allow you to find your bike easily? People easily get lost in transition a lot of times, so don't be that person. Walk the swim over to the bike, where your bike's going to go out, and then where you're going to come in on the bike and go out the run. I can't recommend that enough. That's just going to help you be able to be efficient on your route there. But setting up your actual area by the bike, think about how when you get to your bike after each of the disciplines, what's going to be the most efficient. So when we get out of the swim, you're going to have usually at the front of your towel, you're going to want to have your bike stuff. So that's going to be like your bike helmet, your bike shoes, sunglasses. Some people might do different types of mounts where they have their bike shoes already on the bike. So just knowing what your mounts and dismounts are going to be. So I'll talk about that in a second. But bike stuff at the front, any of your bike nutrition ideally is just already on the bike if you have like a little sort of bento storage box or you have it in your bottles that are on the bike. But just making sure you're not going to forget anything in transition there. So usually it's bike stuff at the front and then run stuff at the back. So that's going to include probably your run shoes, any run nutrition socks. So think about where you're going to put those on. Is it going to be when you get out of the water in transition one? Can be sort of tough sometimes because your feet are really wet, but you do have a towel there, so you could dry it off and put socks on, or decide to put them on for the run there. But usually it's bike stuff at the front, run stuff at the back. You'll have like your run belt as well, which is the thing on top of the helmet there. Maybe a hat as well. Put that at the back. And then when you get out of the water is where you're going to get out of your wetsuit, cap, and goggles. And you'll kind of want to tuck that under where your bike is. You don't want to throw that on top of your run stuff or you're going to come back and have wet run shoes. So just try and get that out of the way. Sometimes if you have enough space, you can almost just hang your wetsuit on the rack and it's like nicely drying for you by the end of your race. But if it gets tight on some of the races, just stash it kind of under where the back wheel of your bike is sort of racked, and then it's just nicely out of the way. Allows you lots of space to grab your bike and run stuff, and then yeah, then you're have a nice efficient route to be able to do that, and then nothing's getting covered or missed under the wetsuit there. Mounts and dismounts, definitely pick the most simple one that you've practiced. So again, we want to practice all this stuff before. Mounts, the most simple is just obviously putting your bike shoes on, walking past the mount line, and then getting on your bike. Same thing when you get back, just unclipping and then running back to your rack spot in your bike shoes. There's more complex ones where you have your shoes already on the bike. There's some great YouTube videos you can watch for that, but I would only recommend doing that if you have practiced it because when you have other people around you and you're buzzing coming out of the swim, you're more likely to make mistakes on it. So pick the one that you know you can do well under pressure. So a cool way we do it with our club is we'll do like transition sims. So you could get 3 or 4 friends together, call it at the end of a training ride or just in a random parking lot, and you sort of set up all your stuff and you practice like as if you're all running in from the swim, doing a quick transition and going out in sort of tight quarters. And those are great ways you can practice sort of that mount under pressure with people around you and figure out a way that you can do an efficient one. But one of the biggest reminders is just always the first thing you should do after you take your wetsuit and cap off is put your helmet on. Because you cannot touch your bike until you have your helmet on and done up. So anytime you're touching your bike, your helmet has to be on and done up. So same thing when we finish the bike leg, we got dismounts. So again, easiest one was just unclip, run to your bike, run to your rack spot with your shoes on. The more complex one is that you can slide your feet out of your shoes while you're on there. You kind of have your feet on top of the shoes for the final couple 100 meters, and you do like a step off or kind of flying dismount off there. But if it's some of your first triathlons, just do the more simple one and just clip and unclip like it's a regular ride is usually the safest way to go. And then, yeah, in terms of like our some ways we can be a little bit quicker, there's some great stuff for run shoes called lock laces. You can get them on Amazon for like $5 or $10. And they're just like elastic laces that go in the shoe. So you don't have to actually tie your shoe in transition. You can just essentially slide them on and then you're off to the races. But in transition to a great way, really all you need to be doing during that time is like getting there, putting socks on, putting your shoes on, and then what I do is I usually have like a cap there, and then I'll just put like my race belt and final nutrition in that cap, and then I just start running with that. So again, if we can do stuff well moving forward towards the finish line, then we can do that, and it's not costing us any extra energy, but it could, I've seen people save like 3, 5 minutes of their finishing time by just being more efficient with transitions. So get in and out of there as quickly as possible. Anything you can do while moving forward is the way to do it. And make sure you practice it under pressure in some race conditions if you get a chance to. So that could even be something like doing 50 jumping jacks and then trying to go do your like flying mount. So you're just like heart rate is amped because you've come from the swim where you're horizontal and now you're vertical. It can be a little bit shocking to the system. So that's why we practice these race day sims and sort of tune up races and stuff like that. So in terms of swim execution, making sure we know where the sun's going to be. Is it going to be wavy out there? How cold is it going to be? So that if it's a really cold race, making sure we have a sleeved wetsuit. Sleeved wetsuit's going to be good for almost all wetsuit conditions, so it's usually the best one to have. But then there's races if it's really hot, then you might have um, wetsuit, not where a race is not wetsuit legal. So that's where you're not allowed to wear your wetsuit and it's like a pool swim essentially. So you just wear your tri suit or wear a bathing suit there and then change and transition. But just know there is potential for that to happen. Goggle choices, I usually like to have a tinted and a clear pair in my um, transition bag just so that if it's crazy sunny, I can use a tinted pair. If it's a little more overcast, you could wear a more of a clear pair. And then just knowing like with your tri suit, again, if you've practiced wearing your tri suit with your wetsuit, doing some open water swims, they can be a little bit restrictive here depending on your brand. So a tip if you find it restrictive in your shoulders on your breathing, you can just leave the tri suit down halfway while you're have your wetsuit over, and then once you start to peel your wetsuit off in transition one, you can always put that top of the tri suit on there. Start positioning. We have two different kinds of starts out there. So there's the wave start, so where you start by like your age group. So you'll see that at a lot of the local races where like everybody in the 18 to 25 category goes off together. Those are hectic ones. So if you're not one of the fastest swimmers, maybe just tuck in the back. If you're a fast swimmer, get up to the front. The other ones are rolling starts. So you'll see this in a lot of the Ironman events where you seed yourself by your swim pace or estimated swim time. Try and seed yourself accurately for those ones, and you'll be swimming around people of the same ability level, which is always really nice. Sighting, we usually want to do that. So sighting means like trying to look up within our swim stroke to see the buoys ahead of us. For most people, you want to be doing that and trying to do it efficiently every 6 to 10 strokes. So if you want to think of like a single arm, you could do like every six sort of with the left arm and then sight like that. One of the keys with sighting is we don't want to just like fully lift our head up because that's just going to make our body vertical again. So if you can either like sort of just look up like this with your eyes and integrate it as part of your stroke, that's a great way to do it. Um, yeah, just if you need to look up to kind of reorient yourself, obviously do it. But then sighting is going to be more and more important the sunnier it is and the wavier it is. But there is a beautiful thing called drafting where you could save up to 10 to 30% of effort if you can find people of similar ability who are staying on course and swim either right on kind of their hip or right on their feet as close, tapping their toes behind. Try not to tap them too much or eventually they'll kick at you. So just trying to do drafting, you'll save some serious benefit in terms of energy and get some free speed off of that. So if you can do it efficiently, then you don't have to sight as much, especially if you got somebody who's staying on course pretty good. Definitely recommend doing some drafting there. And in terms of breathing patterns, just essentially you'll want to use what you did in the pool. So being able to bilateral breathe, so breathe on both sides is a great tool to have. That being said, someone like myself, I'm more efficient breathing on the right side. So I'm breathing almost on my right side every single stroke, but I have the ability to breathe on my left for instances where, say, if the waves are coming on my right side, I know I can breathe on the left. So I'm not just drinking water every stroke. Another piece is if all my buoys are on the left hand side, if I'm breathing on the right every side and I'm trying to go make a left turn, I'm going to fully miss that. So where I'm sighting, I'm seeing a buoy, I'm swimming on my more efficient side. And then as I'm getting close to that buoy, then maybe I'm doing 3 or 4 strokes where I'm breathing on the left side, which allows me to go around that corner. And then I'm going back to breathing on that more efficient side again. So just practicing those breathing patterns so you know how to breathe on both sides, but you can breathe on your more efficient side because you're going to be probably hold better body position, keep your breathing more in check if you do that. One of the biggest mistakes I see in swim is definitely managing effort. People go out so hard when they're excited in that first 1 or 200 meters. If you can hold back on it and sort of build your effort as you go along, it's just going to set you up for the entire day. The swim is just a buy-in for the day. So don't waste all of your energy there and then come out at max heart rate trying to go onto the bike. And it's just this energy level that falls off for the whole day. So um, managing that effort in the swim and just trying to build so you're not gassed when you finish that. Let's talk about bike. There's lots of different ways we can pace the bike. So a lot of people use power meters in this day and age, but there's also great tools across like using your heart rate monitor, knowing that like on a race day, your heart rate's probably going to be elevated, either coming out of the swim, all of the caffeine you've taken. It's a race environment. You're tapered, so naturally your body can sort of go to those higher heart rates. But it can be a guide for you, especially in something like a 70.3 or an Ironman to help you hold back in the early part. But always the king of everything is going to be effort, also known as RPE. So rate of perceived exertion. If you can learn this and learn how to build efforts or hold yourself back and slowly sustain an energy sort of or pace as you go along, that is going to be the king of everything. So we're humans in the end, and you need to be in check with RPE on the day. So in that initial chart I had at the start, you saw some of the RPE of how that RPE should build throughout the day, depending on your race distance. When we talk about any of those races that are 90 plus minutes, even sprints that are an hour, trying to get something in during that race to keep the energy levels up. It really helps with the mental side of things as well. Is super important because sprints high intensity, all the other ones are longer. So we're going to start to burn a lot of carbs and glycogen in these races. So nutrition strategy for most of my athletes, I usually am saying a minimum of 60 grams per hour of carbs on the bike. So make it a nice simple approach. It could just be sport drinking. Say you're doing an Olympic distance and you're biking for an hour, you might have two bottles that each have 30 grams of carbs in them, and you're going to drink those throughout the Olympic distance, and then you know you're getting your 60 grams. And if you can train up to these higher totals in the 70, 80, 90, especially the longer events, it does go a long way. In terms of fluids and sodium, this is very athlete dependent. One of the biggest recommendations I can give on this is there's Precision Fuel and Hydration. If you go on their website, there's a really good fuel, sodium, and hydration calculator you can go on there. I've had people do the actual testing before of it, and what they get off of that website is almost pretty much identical to that. So definitely recommend checking that out. So that's Precision Fuel and Hydration. It's like pinned right at the top of their site. It'll ask you like what kind of conditions you're racing in, how long's the race in terms of distance, and it's going to give you a good fueling strategy for that. So a great one you can do now and practice in your workouts so that when you get on race day, it's automatic. So biggest thing on nutrition is keep it simple. And yeah, the fluid sodium is so dependent on the person. One of the bike execution pieces is like try and stay as aero as possible, so as small as possible into the wind. Just allows us to go faster for the same effort. So you want to be practicing this aerodynamic position, whether that's in the aero bars on a triathlon bike, or if you have a road bike, just like a little bit more draped down on the hoods, like head down, looking up with your eyes, or in the drops there. For the same effort, you could be getting 1 to 3 kilometers an hour faster than that. And then just, you don't need to be as aero if you're going anything like on the hills or flats under like 22 kilometers an hour. So stay alert and stay safe out there. You never know what other athletes are going to be doing. So don't make any assumptions out there, and err on the side of caution wherever possible. And then one of the key things is just so most times cadence, we give people the recommendation, depending on the person, something in the like 80 to 95 RPM range is a good spot for most people to have a good balance between using the muscles, but also using the heart and lungs. So higher the cadence, the more it's putting stress on heart and lungs. Lower the cadence, the more it's putting stress on like the muscles. And then you'll be at a lower heart rate. But you want to find a balance between those two. So 80 to 95 is a great RPM range on that. Usually what we want to do is go up 5 or 10 RPM in the final 5 to 10 minutes of our bike, because usually that allows us to match a little bit more of that run cadence. Just starts to prepare our like mind and muscles for the run that's coming after that. So onto the run. So the rule of thumb in triathlon is always bike for show, run for dough. So you never get to say, "Hey, I had a great swim or a great bike." If you didn't, it's a triathlon in the end. So you got to put all three together to call it a good day. But no, like anything can happen in these races, and like you can still have good days across certain disciplines. But our goal is to be able to execute a good run at the end of this, so everything is setting up for that. So when we talk about pacing off the bike, I'm using an example that I give my athletes for a half Ironman, but you could use this sort of strategy for any sort of distance in this as well. So in this, I'm talking about 21 kilometers. So the 885 strategy, meaning the first 8 kilometers. So maybe I'll do it a little bit more as if it was by percentages. So let's call it the first like 40% of the run is you're really holding back. It's easy to go out too hard and blow yourself up and just be walking or dying at the end. So first 40% getting in rhythm, but it feels like you're holding back a bit. The second 40% is where you're getting in that rhythm, starting to sort of feel what that race pace should feel like. And then the final 20% is where we really need to dig in and sort of empty the tank at the end. And how it works in most races is like the pace almost stays the same across all of this. The RPE is just slowly building. So if we're talking about a half Ironman, the run might start out as a 6 to 7, and then in the second section be a 7 to 8 out of 10, and then by the time we're in that last 20%, it's a 9, 10 out of 10 effort. But you run the same pace the whole way. So that's where the RPE is building across there. But patience is the key on this. But you could use for something like a sprint, you got to almost go hard out of the gate and hold on right away, but more so the longer the distance. Olympic, 70.3, Ironman, trying to break it into 3 parts is a good way to tackle it to make sure you don't blow yourself up. But you should be able to practice a bunch of this in tune-up races and race sims. Similar to the bike, nutrition wise, we're aiming for something a little bit lower just because run jostles us around a little bit more. Also, if we fueled well on the bike, we might not need quite as much on the run as well. For most people, we're recommending something in the 40 to 60 grams per hour range. Fluids and sodium, again, a little bit more custom, so fill out that questionnaire. If you can take on higher totals for something like a 70.3 in Ironman than this, and you have that iron gut, that's great. For nutrition on both of these bike and run is fueling often. So taking something in every 5 to 15 minutes versus having to slam something every 30 minutes to try and catch up is a great way to allow the body to easily digest and have energy and fluids and sodium just kind of trickling in the whole time. So you just keep that energy level nice and strong. We talked about lock laces already in the transition time, but then again for bike and run, knowing where are the key parts on the course to be pushing and recovering. So maybe pushing a little bit on some of the hills, recovering on some of the downhills, and then where are these aid stations? So knowing with your nutrition strategy, do you have everything with you for something like a sprint and Olympic, even 70.3, it's easy to carry all of our fluids, our sodium, our carbs. When we get in something like an Ironman, you might be out there on the bike 6, 7 hours. Your bike doesn't have capacity to carry that. So knowing what we're going to use of our own and bring along, and then what you're going to get from the aid station. So for most people, you'll just need to get water. But if it's something like product that you've trained with before, like Morton, for example, on a bunch of the Ironmans, you could grab some of that off the aid stations and not have to carry as much with you. But also knowing if you drop a bottle, for example, what is at the aid station so that I can fill the void if I drop something. And if I dropped a bottle that had 50 grams of carbs, okay, I need to go make sure that I grab 2 25-gram Morton gels on course. So just thinking about all these pieces ahead of time and trying to plan for any of these contingency pieces like a flat. So practicing and having a flat kit and knowing how to fix a flat, it's not that hard. But you'll be waiting for a long time for course support. So practice that stuff and then, yeah, know the course and the aid stations. Um, I was mentioning to Griffin at the start of this, if anybody is interested, we have an awesome kind of triathlon day coming up for our club, open to external people at $40 for the day. We have Jeff Beach, who is a professional triathlete, fantastic swim coach, who's going to be running everybody through an open water session. doing a bit of transition practice after, and then a little bike workout or brick run that can be scaled depending on how long you want to be going. But no matter what your ability level is, you're definitely welcome to join for anything like that. And then we have a couple different coaches there who are there to support you and ask questions, and a great spot to alleviate a lot of that stress before the race. So that's going to be at Guelph Lake, Saturday, June 7th. And if you do want to register, it's just on lpfit.ca. Go to the endurance tab and you'll be able to find the purchases in that section. All right. That was a lot of info. How's everyone feeling? Overwhelmed? This will be
Oh,
recorded, so
good. Pardon me?
this will be recorded, so you guys can always go back and watch it 4 or 5 times to digest the info.
The one thing I was gonna ask, we definitely have a couple people in the club who would be their first triathlon. What's your, you talked about a lot of different areas. For someone who's their first triathlon, what's your biggest piece of advice, I guess?
Biggest piece of advice.
Or what do you think is most relevant out of everything you talked about, I guess?
Yeah, it's a tough one to answer because there's so many elements
Right?
in
Yeah.
triathlon. But I think one of the biggest things is just like reading ahead and controlling the controllables. So I think the two biggest things they can be doing is first going on the website, reading the course. What is the course going to look like? What's the timetable going to look like? So, and then the second one is that packing list. So for the most part, if you know the schedule, know what the course is going to be, and you have all of your gear, like most of it is managed at that point, and then you're at least on the start line and ready to go. And like you're gonna make some mistakes, but the biggest thing you can be doing is be proactive, control the controllables, and at least you don't rule yourself out by missing the start, forgetting a piece of gear and being all stressed. Like at least if you get on that start line and you make some mistakes, like there's always another race you can come back to in the future. We always have another chance, but don't screw it by making a logistical error. So just get out ahead of things on that side. So that's why I was keeping to hammer home those pieces, is be prepared.
There we go.
Any common questions you usually get from the crew, Griffin, that you think, or like people that are really they're anxious about, whether it's the swim or certain gear stuff or anything like that?
I think a lot of people, especially who haven't done triathlon, their questions always sort of like, oh, what's like the average completion time for each part, right? That's a big one.
Yeah. Yeah, that's why I love to always caveat in there is like I've tried to predict my race like so many times, and unless you get perfect conditions, like a lot of my predictable athletes, yeah, I can predict their Ironman time within 5 or 10 minutes, assuming the conditions are like regular. But I've had everything from canceled swims to an Ironman swim where I usually swim like under an hour. I swim an hour and 20 minutes because there was just white caps out there, or you get 50K an hour winds. So like I put some of the durations there, but no, like depending on the course and the conditions, it's always going to be different. So you just got to get out there and do the best you can and manage your effort. And if you manage your effort and fuel well, and you're going to get to the finish line the fastest you could on that day under those conditions.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. It's a wild sport.
Yeah,
It's a good one though.
for
So
sure.
much fun. Did anybody else have any cues off the top of their head? They can always message me after or message you if they do come up, and I can always address them. So no big deal.
Perfect. Yeah,
Cool.
they can message the workout chat if you'd be able to answer something there. Yeah.
Yeah, of course. Yeah,
Perfect.
on the Instagram one there.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Is that a good spot to I'll post the recording link in there, but I'll also send it to you in case you have any other spots you posted as well.
Yeah, that'd be a good spot for sure. And the link would be great as well.
Love it. I can definitely do that.
Perfect.
Amazing. Well, thanks for spending some time tonight, everyone. Hopefully, I didn't gab on too much, but there's no shortage of information on this, and I've only just scratched the surface on what's possible. So, you
Yeah,
could,
thank you for your time, Mark, as well.
yeah,
Some
no problem. If anybody does
great
want to
information
connect,
here.
Yeah, no problem. If anybody does want to connect with me, LP Endurance and my Instagram are right there. We post up a bunch of like triathlon tips and free guides and stuff that you can also download there. That's my email if you ever want to send me a question. You can also book like 15-minute quick question calls with me as well for free. That you can find that in my Instagram. LP Fit is our LP Endurance page in case anybody needs a quick fill in on anything for summer training or anything like that. But yeah, been fun over the course of this year. And any questions, don't hesitate.
That was super helpful. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Thank you, Mark.
No problem.